This is Michele Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. Today I have another very special guest. I know I say that every week, but today I want you to meet someone that I've been talking to for several months. We've had a little bit of adjusting of schedules to get together on this podcast, but his name is Christian Drapeau, and he's from Canada. And although, Christian, you do go back and forth to the United States from Canada, right?
Actually, I live in the United States now for almost 30 years.
Well, I guess I'm behind the time. Well, you know
Yeah.
why I thought Canada? Because I tried to reach you when you were at your cabin,
There you
and
go. I do go back to
that,
Canada.
that is in Canada. So yeah, where exactly do you live in the U.S.?
In Austin, Texas.
Oh, you're another Texas man. Okay, interesting. Well, what made you? I know Austin is is another high tech hotbed. So is that why you went there, or was there another reason that you ended up matriculating from Canada to Texas?
Well, I moved from Canada to Klamath Falls, Oregon, which is
Correct.
where I started to do all the initial work. Then the first product that we put on the marketplace was through a company that we structured in California, which is
Right.
where I was until moving to Austin. And the company moved out of California and they moved to Florida. But my wife is an actress, and Florida is not really a great state for movie making. So Austin at the time, so in 2014, Austin was a really fast growing city for everything pertaining to cinema. So we decided to go to Austin, and we have not regretted it. It's a really great place to live.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, we in California are very concerned by the number of people that are leaving California for Texas and Florida and Nevada and other places. But I mean, I suppose there is many people coming in as still that makes the state viable, but just to see the kind of departures, and a lot of it has to do with California's politics, I'm afraid to say, but we won't get into
Mhm.
that today. But let me just tell everybody a little bit about you, and then I'm going to let you take over because we have an amazing podcast today. We're talking about a subject that everybody that is in the health and wellness world wants to know more about, because it's actually quite a new subject, relatively speaking, and that's stem cells. And those of you who have studied stem cells will be fascinated by all that Christian has done to advance the stem cell research. And he's written a book called Cracking the Stem Cell Code, which, Tony, I don't know if you have that website, but maybe you could flash during the podcast today, you could flash a copy of the book if you don't mind. But anyway, so Christian, you started out as a neurophysiologist, and your research was all done in Canada with McGill, correct?
Correct. I was at the Montreal Neurological Institute.
Right. That's a pretty not infamous, famous institute, and has a lot of credibility in the brain research world. So, what led you to go from brain research to stem cell research?
Well, it was really I was hired. So my background was, or my research was on epilepsy and memory. And then along the way, I came across a company that was selling a blue-green algae, which is blue-green algae from Klamath Lake. And they were selling this product. And one of the main benefits was an increase in mental clarity, an increase in sort of a sense of mental energy, concentration, focus. And I must say that before all of that, in my teens, I had developed ways of learning fast, accelerated learning methods that I had applied, and it made it easy for me to speak about a topic, a scientific topic, and really make it simple. So it was an interesting package for that company to both lecture for them and their customers, but also to do the research on the product. So that's really why I was hired. I was hired by this company in Oregon. That's my move from Canada to America. So I moved to Klamath Falls to study that plant and establish or document its mechanism of action. So this was right after the passage of Deshay. So after Deshay was passed, companies needed to have science to back up any claims that they were making on their product. So I was hired to do that. So we quickly identified its benefits on inflammation, on immunity, on mental clarity. But as I'm working with this plant, I came across people who reported really really great benefits on conditions like multiple sclerosis, heart problem, diabetes, kidney failure, liver failure, Parkinson's, COPD, emphysema. And so the question to me was, what is this product doing to bring benefit to the heart, to someone's heart, someone else's liver, pancreas, lungs, brain, joint, skin, and so on? There was no understanding of how a product could do so many things in the body. So we did research for a few years, and it's only in the early 2000, like 2001, where I came across an article. The title was Turning Blood into Brain. It was the first documentation, to my knowledge, of a stem cell going from the bone marrow, going to the brain and becoming a brain cell. We need to position ourselves back into 2001. At that time, stem cells are only known to be precursors to blood cells, and of all new cells in the body, all new organs, the brain, we know, does not repair, does not regenerate. At least that's what we were told at the time. So an article showing that a stem cell was going from the bone marrow to the brain, I thought was an amazing breakthrough. So I dug a little bit more in the scientific literature, found similar articles documenting stem cells going to the liver and to the heart and becoming liver cells and heart cells. So I thought, so we're back in 2001, I thought, if stem cells can become heart, liver, and brain, why not pancreas, lungs, skin, and the rest? It makes no sense that it would become those three and not the rest. And if they do become all these cells, then they have to be the repair system of the body. And in the back of my mind, the thought was, if stem cells are the repair system of the body, what if a plant were to trigger the release of stem cells? They would go to the pancreas of the diabetic, the heart of the heart patient, the brain of the Parkinson patient. And we should expect a broad variety of benefits. And that's what we had with AFA. So that's how it all started. The thought that what if this blue-green algae worked by triggering the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So we acquired the equipment to count stem cells and very quickly discovered that that's how that plant was working. So everything I did stopped, and I shifted everything, all my activity, into the field of stem cell research. So that's how I became involved in the field of stem cell research.
So Christian, the pluripotency issue has always been a question, and kind of the miracle of stem cells. That how could a cell have a brain, a stem cell, to know where to go when it gets into the body? That it goes where where it's most needed, where the repair is most. How explain that to a lay person that a stem cell can be pluripotent?
Okay, let me just, before I answer your question directly, put that into a greater context, because I think it will help make this answer easier. We look at, by we, I mean population in general, we look at stem cells as a new discovery, cutting edge science, new treatments. How could stem cells do this or that? And what we need to understand is that this is coming from the fact that we're just learning about it. Stem cells have been there for as long as we've been humans, and they're there since the day we are born. They are your repair system. They have done, like, you would never ask that question when you have a cold and you say, how can an immune cells go to my lung and magically kill a virally infected cells? It's not magical. It's what they do. It's their role. Stem cells do exactly the same thing. They are the repair system. And that's what we need to understand. What is new is that we didn't know about this before. And the more we dig, the more we find ways to tap into the regenerative power of stem cells, but it is our repair system. So the way that they can become, that they're pluripotent, is just because it's their nature. We all started from one cell, the zygote, which is the sperm in the egg that makes the one cell that is the ultimate stem cells that has become the entire you, the entire us. So that was more than pluripotent, it was totipotent, meaning it can become everything. And as we develop after birth, we are left with these stem cells that are no longer totipotent, but they are pluripotent, meaning that they can become almost everything or a lot of things. And then as they progress in their transformation, not in our lives, but as the life of a stem cell, then it becomes more multipotent, meaning they can do many things, but it's more restricted. Then they become progenitor cells. As they get into a tissue, now they become stem cells of that tissue. But at the origin in the bone marrow, they're pluripotent. It is their role. And they will find where to go because they will be attracted by an injured tissue as this tissue is releasing inflammatory compounds, SOS compounds, these compounds called stem cells, to that tissue, just like an infected tissue will call for immune cells, the same mechanism.
So how do you define the difference between a stem cell and an immune cell or a regular cell? If you were kind
Every
of
yeah,
a
every cell of the body is referred to as a somatic cell. Soma means physical matter. So it's a cell of your body. It's a cell of your heart, and it does one specific thing. It contracts. A cell of your retina, it responds to light. A beta cell of your pancreas makes insulin. Every cell has one specific function. It has a very specific physical structure. We can recognize them under a microscope, and they will never transform to become something else. A stem cell is nothing. If you look at it under the microscope, it looks like an immune cell. You cannot really identify it. Its identity, what makes it a stem cell, is that it's the only cell in your body that if you put it in the context or in the environment, let's say, of a liver, it will become a liver cell. You put it in contact with heart cells, they will transform into heart cells. You put them in contact with the skin, they will become skin cells. So they will become any type of cell types in which they find themselves. So as they leave the bone marrow as a stem cell, their fate is to travel and then to enter into a tissue where they will become cells of that tissue and will be part of the repair or the maintenance of that tissue.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Gematria Products. Gematria is based in Carlsbad, California, and they manufacture ultra-high quality dietary supplements using QI technology. Qi, as you probably know, is the energy that runs throughout our bodies and is the basis of Chinese medicine. Use the code AGELESS and get 20% off your order. I highly recommend Gemetria's products. I personally use the Complete Aminos, the Heart Gems, and the Methuselah Life, which is an RNA and DNA sublingual spray. The website to go to is www.gematria.com/QI-technology. And there you'll find out more about this fascinating company, their products, and the technology.
So apoptosis, the cell turnover, happens, they say, every 7 years, right? So what you're born with is not going to be the cells that you have when you're 30 years old. So how do you explain how stem cells come to the aid of apoptosis to be there for you as you age?
Very, very good question, because what you just mentioned was a reality that was sort of like a deep, deep common sense, but there was not a lot of science wrapped up around this idea that that you change every 7 years. What stem cell research has revealed is that the 7 years in itself is not correct. What is correct is that there is such a thing as tissue turnover. We lose cells and we replace them, and there's this turnover. The reality is that every single organ and tissue will have its own turnover rate. You get a new liver every 2-3 years, a new pancreas 4 to 6 years, a new skin every month, half of a new heart every 25 years. The entire body is constantly in process of turnover. Apoptosis is a phenomenon of, let's say, cellular suicide. It's part of the genome of a cell. When a cell reaches certain characteristics, certain criteria that are the characteristics of a cell that is too old and is becoming dysfunctional, it triggers, or cancerous, it triggers that process and it commits suicide. So it takes itself out of the pool of cells. So that's what is apoptosis. So the real life of a cell is that it comes as a stem cell, leaves the bone marrow, migrates into a tissue like the liver, then becomes the stem cell layer of that liver that they proliferate. In the liver, they're called oval cells. These are the stem cells of the liver. And then they provide new liver cells to that tissue that will live their life as liver cells, which is about 2-3 years in the liver. And at the end of their life, they trigger apoptosis, and then they disappear from the liver. And you have this constant renewal process taking place in every single organ and tissue of the body. And where that is super important is to realize that we are born with red marrow that makes stem cells, but the red marrow converts into yellow marrow or fatty marrow that does not make stem cells very early in life. By age 30, we have lost 90% of our red marrow. And that coincides with a 90% decline in the number of stem cells in circulation, meaning there's a point in our 30s when we all discover we're no longer Wonder Woman, Superman. We don't have enough stem cells to offset this normal process of cellular loss. And that's when we start, for the first time in our lives, to think about aging, because now we experience it. It's from that point on. And aging from that point on is to a large extent caused by this decline in the number of stem cells available to maintain our tissue. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so is that pretty standard? I mean, or is there a rate of cellular senescence that varies based on the lifestyle of the person or obviously if you just put one factor, chronological age, but what about all the other factors? Do they affect the rate of cellular senescence? Somebody might be in their 40s or 50s and still have many more stem cells than someone who's in their 30s.
Yeah, I mean, these are two questions. So the number of stem cells is one thing, senescence is something that is different. But we are kind of early in the study of senescence, not so much in the physiological reality of senescence, but in what we're doing in our life in terms of lifestyle to affect senescence, accelerate it, make it more important, or eliminate it. So we know as of today, there are compounds referred to as senolytics that are going to help these senescent cells, like these cells that are old that should trigger apoptosis, but for some reason do not, then they become dysregulated and they're sort of negative cells for their environment. So there are ways of making these cells trigger apoptosis and kill themselves. But there is a whole discourse, and I remember maybe 10 years ago in France, there was this idea that was developing, and scientists were saying, well, antioxidants are good, but you could take too many antioxidants. I thought the idea was kind of a little strange. But now with all this emergence of all this science about senolytics, there is an interesting question as to when we provide too much protection for the body, do we somewhere cross a line where we protect these aging cells and provide them with enough nutrition to kind of continue to live in that senescent cells? And it's actually not positive. So there are things that we can do. We know exercise helps senescent cells to get away. And there's also autophagy that comes into this whole process. When an aging cell has the capacity to kind of rejuvenate by cleaning itself within. And that is something that is taking place during fasting, or we have discovered now that there are compounds like spermidine, for example, and others that are going to trigger the process of autophagy in the cell without having to fast. So all of these can affect a stem cell that has penetrated a tissue and now becomes cells of that tissue and then starts its process of aging in that tissue. Mm-hmm. As the stem cells themselves in the bone marrow, the conversion of red marrow to yellow marrow, it has been known for a long time, but its significance in longevity and aging is a very, very novel understanding. So I am not aware of any research that has been done to either determine what things that we do in our lifestyle or exposure to certain components of the air, water, whatever, that could affect the rate of conversion of the red marrow. So I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of any compounds that have been studied for their ability to do what is called reconversion, going from fatty marrow and regrow the red marrow. There's one big warning is that when we see normally something called reconversion, that your red marrow expands, normally this is linked to leukemia. So somewhere this concept of trying to create reconversion and grow our red marrow, lots of research would have to be done and safety trials would have to be done to make sure that can be achieved with safety. But if there was a way of really making red marrow re-expand, it would probably, I think, be the single most impactful thing that we could do for longevity.
A really important point that you've just made. And I don't think, I would be interested if David Sinclair at Harvard, with his resveratrol and his senolytics, whether he would be going down that path in his research, Have you heard anything about anything going on there with him taking a lead in senolytics? Okay, well,
Not yet, not yet. I'm still yet to meet David Sinclair, but I'm sure we can have a great discussion about it because what we do have a lot in common, although they belong to completely two different fields. And what I mean is that when a stem cell gets into a tissue, that stem cell will become 5 to 10,000 tissue cells. So a million stem cells that migrate in a tissue that has an injury, which is reality. If you release, let's say, 10 million stem cells with some of the herbs that we have, an herbal extract that we're working with, these are, out of these 10 millions, a million could very well migrate into an injured tissue and then become a billion tissue cells, 5 billion tissue cells. So when that happens, the magnification, the amplification taking place in the tissue costs an enormous amount of energy, number one, but all these new cells need to have mitochondria. So the expansion of healthy mitochondria, well equipped to do what new cells are doing, really is totally needed by these cells. So anything touching NMN and anything supporting mitochondrial function will have a big impact in supporting these new stem cells. So somewhere it's extremely complementary.
yeah. So what you're saying is, if it's one thing to mobilize from the bone marrow, it's another thing to migrate successfully into the tissue and to have an environment that's welcoming rather than destructive, because a lot of people have cells in their tissues that are not welcoming of the stem cells. So I don't know if that's kind of a simplistic way of saying it, but I think what the difference between mobilization and migration and then acceptance, there'd be three levels, right, of the stem cell integration.
Correct.
Christian, how do you measure, or how can you count? Is there any kind of a test that you
Of
can
course.
tell a person how many stem cells they have at any one time in their body?
Yes, there's a. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I was going to say, maybe differentiate between in the bone marrow versus in the tissues. Is because those are two very different counts, right? How many are sitting in the bone marrow waiting to be mobilized, and how many are in the tissues being utilized by the body to heal and repair?
Yeah. To do a stem cell count in a tissue, in a human tissue, I'm not going to say it's not possible. It is possible, but it is a biopsy in a very specific area of the tissue. So to quantify stem cells in a tissue is not a simple matter, and I'm not aware that it is done clinically at this point. You can do it from the bone marrow. So that will be a bone marrow aspiration, and that is done. We're doing a study right now on our product StemRegen, specifically to see its impact on the population of stem cells in the bone marrow. But once you did the aspiration or you take a blood sample, the technique to quantify stem cells is the same, which is basically the use of a flow cytometer. The traditional means is still usable, which is to plate them, put them into a petri dish, and grow them in specific medium that will make stem cell grow. And then as you count the colony that are being formed, you can count the number of stem cells. But it's tedious and it's not as precise as the novel technology, which is flow cytometer. It is a machine that aligns cells one behind the other into a very fine tube, and as they lined up, they go in front of a laser, and that laser will shed light of different colors and will illuminate these cells. And if you first attach to these cells different antibodies for markers of stem cells, markers of cells that are not stem cells, so it allows you to exclude those that are not stem cells, then you can count the cells that meet all the criteria for being a stem cells, and you count them. So that's the technique that is used with flow cytometry. That's what we have used in all of our studies. The problem is that that device is normally used in cancer treatment. So you will not find this at your doctor's office. You will not find this at if you go and have a normal blood sample taken for what is normally done in terms of blood test, then they will not have the technique to be able, the method or the equipment to be able to do stem cell count. I'm working on developing this machine right now. We're very close, so give it maybe another year, and we may have a way fairly cheap to be able to quantify the number of stem cells in the blood. But when we have this technique, there's another layer to this. It's to understand that it is a very, very small population of cells in your blood. And the problem is that if you just sneeze, for example, and you squeeze your spleen, you will change the proportional population of your immune cell, your lymphocytes in your blood. You're not going to change how many stem cells you have, but you're going to change your statistical power in counting these stem cells. So my point is that it's not a simple task to count stem cells. So I don't know when it is that we will have a way where somebody can go in a lab and just say, tell me how many stem cells I have in my blood, and I can rely on that one test. So it's not done yet.
It's not that advanced yet, but because 10 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to test your telomere length or your DNA methylation or your intrinsic versus extrinsic age, biological aging versus chronological. I mean, all these things are, I know I've heard you say this, and I couldn't agree with you more, that, and I've said it many times on my podcast, that in the last 10 years, there's been more advancement in medicine than the last 100 years. And if you step forward with AI and the other technologies that are becoming much more widely available, imagine what the next 10 years will be like. I'll bet you that that will be readily available for I just wonder out loud with you, is it valuable information to have as a practitioner? And I know you're on the research side, but developing products, nutraceuticals to support your research. So do you think it's valuable for anyone to know, people to know, other than people who have a serious illness, to know what their stem cell count is, just like they know what their blood, certain blood markers are?
I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that as this is more developed and people reach a greater understanding, by people, I mean the medical community reaches a greater understanding of the role of stem cells in health and wellness and disease formation, that the number of stem cells in your bloodstream will become probably the single most relevant measure to know not necessarily your longevity, but how well you will live in the years to come. And I'm saying this because let's go back for a moment to what I was talking about before. As you pass 30s, the number of stem cells in your bloodstream declines significantly, so you don't have enough stem cells to offset cellular loss. If we understand that, then I published this about 10 years ago in the scientific literature as a hypothesis. And the hypothesis was we develop diseases because if you think about it, every single degenerative disease is the loss of a type of cells. If you have diabetes, you lost the cells making insulin. If you have cardiomyopathy, you're losing muscle cells in your heart. You have Parkinson, you're losing cells making dopamine in your brain. And you go like this to almost any diseases. It's always the loss of a type of cell or a loss of function of a type of cells. So that means that from the moment you don't have enough.
Uh-oh. Something happened with your camera, Christian. Can you hear me? Tony?
True.
Are you... Oh. Okay, we lost you. We lost you for about a nano minute here.
A nano minute, okay.
Yeah, but go ahead. I think if you it'll be okay.
Okay, I think, do you have the recording? Because I think I saw when I started to freeze. Do you want me to go back a little bit behind?
Yeah, no, we can edit. So,
okay.
So you go ahead and just keep.
Okay, so the idea was, let's go and count the number of stem cells in the bloodstream of people who have developed various types of age-related diseases, and let's compare that with healthy people of the same age. And now there's a number of studies that have been done. If you count the number of stem cells in the bloodstream of people with diabetes, atherosclerosis, heart disease, COPD, erectile dysfunction, liver failure, kidney failure, lupus, arthritis, Alzheimer's, Parkinson, and the list keeps growing. Every time one of those studies is done, the result is always the same. 50% of or less in the number of stem cells in circulation when compared with healthy people. Meaning you have developed the problem because for 1 or 2 decades, every day, you just did not have enough stem cells to offset cellular loss, combined with lifestyle that probably accelerated cellular loss. So the moment we understand this, it means if you can put more stem cells in circulation every day of your life, you repair better, you maintain your tissue better, and you maintain the health that you have today for the decades to come. So it will become, I think, the most important parameters to predict whether in a decade or two from now you will be healthy.
And that's really another very important point, because affordability, if we take the stem cell injectables versus the oral, which you so generously have done the research to create for humanity, which we'll talk about in a moment. But if you take the injectables, they're very expensive. They're not really affordable for most people. And yet, if you just kind of assume that, okay, after 30, you're going to have fewer of the red marrow stem cells, you need to continue to improve that number, that count, to have them be more efficacious for repairing in the body, in the tissue. So if you say that, and you just kind of assume, like with heavy metals, I just assume, why do I need to take a heavy metal test? Because I know everybody has heavy metals, so why don't I just start treating for heavy metals and forget the test? But I think you can pretty well assume with what you're saying, that most people, I mean, healthy can mean, yes, you have more stem cells available to repair in the tissue. However, you still may need more stem cells to move forward into aging. So why not just get them? But the availability part and the affordability part, I think, are the big stopgaps. So that brings me to the very important point of Stem Regen, which is the product that you've developed and is now available to the wide range of humanity that wants to increase their stem cells. So just tell us how that product came about, and if you could incorporate your experience at Klamath with the development of Stem Regen and how it morphed into that becoming the product that actually turned the tide for you, and was a big change in your life. But yet, a lot of what you did at Klamath is now reflected in the Stem Regen product. Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
So as I was talking about this blue-green algae, we discovered that it was acting as a stem cell mobilizer, putting more stem cells in circulation. If we go back in 2001, 2002, when all that work was done, coming out with a message to say, we have found a plant that is putting more stem cells in circulation. I mean, without an exception, every single scientist were responding to this by saying, it doesn't mean anything. More stem cells in circulation doesn't mean anything, and maybe it's bad for you. So there was, and then if you don't have a mechanism of action, maybe it's just random. So we had to go into identifying the mechanism of action, the active compound, proof of concept, and then the literature that was developing at the time really brought all the data needed to say, yes, more stem cells is better. So that took a number of years. We launched that extract itself in 2005. But what I continued to do is that, for me, it was clear, the moment that we find that a plant has an effect on stem cells, there has to be other plants. We evolved in symbiosis with the environment. Let's go back to what I was talking earlier on. The overall context is to understand that stem cells are simply the repair system of the body. Just like you have an immune system, we just discovered the body as a repair system. So just like you don't have one single plant in the whole world of plants having an effect on the immune system, there has to be other plants. So how do we find them? So I simply asked the question, just like the observations that we had on AFA, which is a plant that is bringing many, many different types of benefits, and we discovered it because it has an effect on stem cells. Then we started to look at other plants known to have many, many benefits. So we looked at medicinal mushroom, goji berry associated with longevity, some seaweeds, astragalus, things like this that have been known oftentimes as adaptogens, meaning they bring a lot of goods for you, but we don't know how they work. Well, all of them we found they have an effect on stem cells. But the big discoveries is when I went into remote areas of the world, like when I had a chance to go to Madagascar, Papua New Guinea. I didn't go, but colleagues of mine went there. So from these regions, Papua New Guinea, the Congos, South America, what are they using there outside of the global economy? What is their go-to plant for many types of health problems? And that's where we found like very interesting plants. Like in Madagascar, they have about 65 species of aloe, but there's only one that they have used for centuries to make a product called Vahona, which they use for all kinds of health problems. So Vahona is made out of one species of aloe called Aloe macroclada. So we tested it and we got so far the strongest response that we have ever had. So, but it's not a product that exists on the marketplace. So for that one, we had to develop our own system of collection, harvesting by tapping into the Malagasy populations. And then we set up a manufacturing plant. So now we have our own system to collect Aloe macroclada. And then we also discovered on the Tibetan plateau, Aloe macroclada, seabuck thornberry, utilized for centuries, if not millennia, with in Tibetan medicine, Mongolian medicine, traditional Chinese medicine. It has been used for problems of the lung, of the heart, cardiovascular system, function of the pancreas, and to help people repair from broken bones or burn to the skin. When you look at the spread of these benefits, to me, it's telling me it's likely that it has an effect on stem cells. So we derived an extract in collaboration with a company they're harvesting on the Tibetan plateau, and we documented that it acts as a stem cell mobilizer. It needs to be seabuck thornberry grown at high altitude. And in this fashion, we also owned in Noto ginseng, the original ginseng. We know ginseng has been documented for centuries for so many benefits, so many different types of benefits. We found that Noto ginseng puts more stem cells in circulation. And the last one is fucoidan, which is a polysaccharide coming from brown seaweeds. It has been used for centuries for all kinds of benefits. But the one we're utilizing, the one from fucus, because we can also extract from fucus fluorotannins, which has also been associated with longevity and health and repair of the nervous system. So we're using a fucoidan fluorotannin extract from fucus. So these are the top 5 plants that we have studied over the years, and we have included in StemRegen, where you take 2 capsules of StemRegen and you will release an average of 10 million of your own stem cells.
Okay, so what happened to the blue-green algae? Why was that not included in the StemRegen? If that was where you started?
It is.
Oh,
it is. So it's StemRegen, seabuck thornberry, Aloe macroclada, Noto ginseng, and the fucus extract.
Okay, so if you're taking blue-green algae or you're doing green drinks, that only enhances what you're already getting with the StemRegen, then, right? That would just be.
You would have to take 5 grams of it to be able to get the effect of what we have in StemRegen. So it's totally doable.
Okay, so what about the person who wants to get the extra bang for the buck and has the extra availability of the monetary side? What about combining the injections with the StemRegen? Have you done any research on the effects of the 2 together versus each one by itself?
Yeah, we have done. Actually, it's ongoing. It's a research that is ongoing right now. And it came from the fact that the idea of doing it came from a colleague of mine he's a cardiologist in Madrid and also in Miami. And I've been working with him for many years, a decade. And then he would typically do stem cell injection and then use StemRegen with the stem cell injection. And historically, he gets much better results than his colleagues. And oftentimes when he mentions that to his colleagues, they don't believe it because it's hard to believe that these 2 simple capsules can have that kind of impact, on health and recovery. So we decided to just document that in a study. So we have an ongoing study right now where we study congestive heart failure. So the patients, the participants, all have stable chronic congestive heart failure. They are treated with all the typical treatments that is being provided to these patients. And then we simply add on top of this either StemRegen alone or stem cell injection, or a combination of both. And the idea was to be able to compare how StemRegen compares to an injection, but also what benefits do you get by combining both? And it's ongoing. So we have preliminary data on 10 of these participants. And what we can share is that of these 10 participants, all of them have seen significant improvement in cardiac function to the point where after 6 months, their heart function is pretty much normalized. When we compare that with stem cell injection, they get slightly better results. But when we combine the both, stem cell injection and stem regen, they get much better results. So really, what is coming out of that study, and it's ongoing, so we will publish all the data when it's final. I'm working right now on publishing these preliminary data, but it pretty much says if you can't afford a stem cell injection, then it will be foolish to not add stem regen with it. And if you can't afford stem cell injection, then tapping into something that can release your own stem cells, put more of your own stem cells in circulation, already enhances your innate ability of repair enough to bring you significant benefits.
And Christian, what is the difference between the umbilical and the embryonic and then the adult stem cells? I know there's a lot of controversy. People don't understand the difference. Most people think that the best thing is to get the umbilical because that's the baby stem cells that haven't matured and they're much more effective. So can you just explain those terms to people, to our audience?
Yes, the embryonic stem cells are not really a thing. I mean, there are a thing on the research side. On the treatment side, they are too wild as stem cells, if I put it into in simple terms, and they have too high of a risk of developing creating tumor formation. So they're not really utilized. So that's not really an option in the marketplace. So the main options will be umbilical cord stem cells or adult stem cells, and adult stem cells can come from your blood, your bone marrow, or from your fat tissue. Umbilical cord stem cells are also adult stem cells. So the difference between the two, and let me preface this by saying that you will find people who will only swear about umbilical cord stem cells, and they'll tell you they're the best, and then the rest is really not valid. And you have other people who will tell you the best is fat-derived stem cells, much better than umbilical stem cells, and they will only pitch sort of that side. Let me try to be as objective as I can because it doesn't matter to me. I'm not in that industry. The advantage with umbilical cord stem cells is to understand that stem cells age in your body. So if you, and let me just share a study, for example, done in mice. If you take a relatively old mouse, let's say a 10-month-old mouse, and you trigger an injury in that animal, and if you take stem cells from an old mouse and you inject those stem cells compared to stem cells, umbilical cord stem cells from a mouse or from a very young mouse, you will get much better repair with young stem cells. So young stem cells are more effective. From that, there is an idea that had developed on the marketplace. I mean, in things like, for example, Tony Robbins' book, where the message that they're conveying is that past 40 years of age, your stem cells are worthless. And therefore, you need umbilical cord stem cells. This is entirely false. There is no truth to that. There's a truth to the fact that they're not as good as when you were 2 years old. No question about it. But the study that I just talked about on congestive heart failure, that populations are men and women between the age of 68 and 76 years old. And after 6 months, just of releasing their old stem cells, they have recovered normal heart function. So there's no truth to that. They are less effective, but they're still very effective. So the argument against umbilical cord stem cells, it is a weaker and weaker argument as we move forward. But it is the fact that as you inject or as you isolate umbilical cord stem cells, they come from a different individual. So you rarely have something that is 100% just one thing. You always have some impurities. So these impurities, they are foreign objects in your body, foreign bodies. So your body can react to them. And we still don't know in 10, 15, 20 years down the road, are you going to slowly develop some form of autoimmune problem or super slow grade rejection that could be the source of a problem in the future? As we move, the probability of this is going less and less because we don't seem to see that emerging. But we have not done this long enough to be certain about it. So that is one. The other one is that you are now bringing genetic code from another person, which can have positive and negative effect. Positive meaning that it brings diversity into your gene pool population, if you want. So now you've seeded your bone marrow with cells that have the different genetic material, and if anything, it could complement and make you stronger. But if you have genes in there that are prone to tumor formation, for example, or other sort of deleterious effect in your body, now you start to have that in your body. So these are the arguments against umbilical cord. I think that at the end of the day, they don't amount to a significant risk. So I'm not saying don't do umbilical cord injection, but there's an interesting alternative, which is fat-derived stem cells, because the stem cells in your fat tissue are relatively dormant stem cells. So when you take stem cells from your fat tissue, if you're, let's say, 60 years old, they are not 60-year-old stem cells. So that's a nice alternative, and you have plenty of them. So you can extract those stem cells many times in your lives. So it kind of kills a little bit the idea of making sure you capture your newborn stem cells in case he needs them in his life. Down the road, fat stem cells are pretty good. I'm not saying don't do it. What I'm saying is that the cost, like the return on investment of keeping these stem cells frozen for decades, when we don't really know, when you really thaw them 40 years later, are they going to be as effective as your fat stem cells as a 40-year-old? This is still a question that is unanswered. So in any case, I think fat-derived stem cells are just as good. And then you have bone marrow stem cells that you can aspirate. They're more pluripotent than your fat stem cells, but they have aged, not necessarily as much as you, but they have aged, and they're not as powerful as a stem cells, let's say, than what you get from your fat tissue, but they can become everything in your body. So that's kind of the spectrum here. So that's why some of the top clinics, what they will do is that they will take a bone marrow aspiration, they will take fat-derived stem cells, and they will add to this umbilical cord stem cells. They make that cocktail, and that's what they give you, which is really sort of the ultimate stem cell injection.
Oh, and where can you go if you want it in the United States, where stem cells are still heavily regulated? Can you get these injections that you just described here in the U.S.?
The cocktail that I just described now is done, I believe, I don't know if it's still done, but I believe it is still done by the clinic of Harry Adelson in Utah. So he is one of the clinics doing that in the country. I'm not aware of another one that does all this cocktail in the country. You can get that easily in Panama, in Costa Rica, in Colombia. There are various clinics have been set up, and that's the kind of approach that they're taking, which is a very effective approach. The approach that we are taking with a product like StemRegen and herbal extract that release your own stem cells is that you can do this every day. You cannot go and get these types of injections every day, of course. You cannot even do this every month. Just once a year is already a significant burden for most people. So here you take 2 capsules and you release 10 million of your own stem cells. You can do this every day. After a month, you've released 300 million of your own stem cells. After a year, you have released essentially 4 billion of your own stem cells. It starts to be cumulatively a very, very significant impact on your body's ability to stay healthy. And then you combine that with doing other things that reduces the rate at which you lose cells. Good diet, NMN, good lifestyle. And then I am pretty sure that you can definitely increase your health span very significantly, if not your lifespan.
Okay, so I have another question then, because I know Dr. Todd, you and I spoke about Dr. Ovakaitis, and he's one of my sponsors. Excuse me, and he mentioned that he trained Dr. Edelson, I think, in Utah. So I had heard about Dr. Edelson, but he said the price was so, out there for a treatment that most people wouldn't even be able to consider it. But what do you feel about what Dr. Todd and Demetria and Dr. Todd Ovakaitis, and he's doing in Carlsbad?
Yeah, I would need to go and visit him and get more detail about what he's doing to be really able to talk about it. V cells, so very small embryonic-like stem cells, they are the most potent type of stem cells in the body. They are in a dormant state. They can be in an activated state. Interestingly enough, some of the plants that we have in StemRegen, we have also documented that they also increase the number of these V cells in the blood and also activate a number of them. So they can be activated on their own, or at least with plants. But I would need to just know more about what he's doing. I have heard only good things, so there's nothing I can say, but it's hard for me to say anything more because I still have some questions before I can have a full understanding of how effective the approach is. Right. So I'll do this. I'll reach out to him and I'll go and visit him.
Yeah, I would love to, and I mean, you know each other, so I don't need to
Yep.
connect. But when I went there and I did the treatment with him, they took vials of my blood and then they centrifuge that with, and then they laser it back into the body and they pick 4 or 5 areas of the body that, or they ask you, what areas would you like to have injected. So that's the only thing. I never felt anything different afterwards. I mean, one thing they did say that they did the female organs, and they said, "Oh, you might get your menstrual cycle again," which would be quite shocking, but but I didn't, and so I don't, I never felt anything different. I guess you don't feel anything; you just know that it's doing good for your body, but and I had nothing to repair, so at that
Mhm.
moment in time, so it wasn't like we were trying to do a wound healing or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, he's definitely one, and that, and then European Wellness. You know Dr. Michael Chan from.
I don't.
Okay, I'm gonna, after the podcast, I'm gonna send you his contact info. I think they use sheep though. Is that something that you
Mhm.
would ever entertain as using stem cells from animals?
I would not. I think this is just me, okay? But I think that a lot of these techniques, these methods were developed in the early days of stem cell research at a time when we did not understand really the power of the stem cells that we find in the human body. So
Yeah,
as we discover really what stem cells can do, then the go-to is to go and where can we get them? So we
yeah,
can get them from sheep. I mean, I've heard treatments done with sheep stem cells, fish stem cells, duck stem cells. But the moment that we realize that the human body has stem cells and we can get them from the human body, uh, you inject the stem cells from a sheep, that means you have sheep DNA in your body. So
that's
how really viable are these cells? And
right.
is there, sorry?
No, that is exactly
Yeah,
my is, do I want to have pig or
yeah.
sheep?
So I would not do it. And what, you said something before that is important to just emphasize. Stem cells are your repair system, whether you feel something or not. When you
Mm,
put more stem cells in circulation, that's what stem cells do. They
mm,
will either go and find an area in the body to go and repair, or they will be called back by the bone marrow. And as they
mm,
go back in the bone marrow, if they come, let's say, from embryonic stem cells or from your fat tissue as younger stem cells, they go back and they become another source of new stem cells that will be re-released. So you're
mm.
kind of repopulating your stem cells because that's how, if somebody has a treatment for leukemia, what they do is that they irradiate the person and then inject stem cells in the bloodstream. These stem cells go back to the bone marrow and they reconstitute the entire bone marrow. So these stem cells, when we inject them, they find their way to the bone marrow. So as you do this, you recreate a new, younger strain, if you want, of stem cells, and they will re-echo for benefits for a long time after the injections. So my point in all of this is that as you put more stem cells in the body, they do what stem cells do. They will repair. You may not necessarily experience the benefit, and the thought that it was worthless because I didn't feel the benefit is a wrong conclusion. If your stem cells did not do what stem cells do, you would not be
Right.
alive. Keep in mind, you have a liver and you live every 2, 3 years. So the fact that you're still alive today means your stem cells are doing their work. So feeling
That's
them is great. I understand, but they do the job no matter what.
that's really important. Okay, well, I wanted to tell you that I knew the time would go by very, very fast today, and it has. And so they just flagged me that we have to end it. But I wanted to let people know how to reach you and how to buy StemRegen. And I wanted to mention their that very generous offer that for the consumer who looks at your website, I guess, goes to your website, which is, what is it, www.stemregen.com?
It's stemregen.co, so stemregen.co.
CO. Okay, CO, everybody. Okay, so go to the website, and then I'll work with with Christian's people to get a code, but the code that we usually use is ageless. So if I can just assume that will work, And if not, I will put it on the show notes. But if Ageless will work, that's will get you a 15% discount. And I've been using this product now for, I think, 4 or 5 months, Christian. You so kindly sent me some, and I take 2 a day. I don't, like you said, I'm not feeling any differently, but I know that they're doing their job. So that gives me comfort. So that's what I think everybody should be aware of. I can't think of a better way to increase your stem cells than to do it orally, because the other injectable is just not as practical for most people. So this is a way to address the issue that your stem cells are decreasing as we age, and they're not as high quality. But this way, with the stem regen, you're giving your body its ability to produce its own. And I say this all the time to my endocrinologist doctor. I say, I don't want my body to get lazy and stop making the thyroid or the DHEA or whatever the hormone. So it's the same thing with stem cells. You want your body to be encouraged with the stimulants that are the ingredients. I don't want to say stimulant, but ingredients that are in the products here that Christian has so just diligently researched. I mean, you don't find products like this just anywhere. Believe me, I've done my homework on stem regen. So I'm giving my Ageless and Timeless endorsement, because I think that it's something very important that people should know about, and easy to do. So okay, so to reach you, if someone had questions, Christian, is there a clinical person at your company that someone could talk to?
Well, they can go on Instagram at Stem Cell Christian, and they can DM me there, or if not, care@stemregen.co, and then it will get to somebody that can answer.
Okay, because I'm sure a lot of people do have questions before they jump into something like this, or even after they've been taking it for a while. So, all right, well, we have to sadly end, but it's been a fascinating discussion, and you covered things that are complicated in a very layperson's way, that very understandable. And I know you probably have to come down several notches, because this is this is a challenge unto itself, to be able to take the complex and make it understandable for the masses. So I do appreciate that you can do that so effectively. And I would like to thank you for taking the time today and being so gracious to share your knowledge and this incredible product, and your book, by the way. People want to read the book. Thank you again, Christian. Have a beautiful weekend, and take care.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.